September 3rd, 1260, a Mongol commander is surrounded. His army is collapsing. And, for the first time in decades, the soldiers who had made kings tremble are running from the battlefield. But that is not the most shocking part. Only months earlier, these same Mongols had destroyed Baghdad, crushed the armies of Syria, and sent terrified rulers fleeing without even fighting. Their next target was Egypt. If Egypt fell, the Mongol advance could reach the heart of the Arab world. So why, on this morning, was the greatest military machine of the medieval world trapped in a valley? And how did a smaller army convince the Mongols to walk straight into the trap? The answer begins with a decision made hundreds of miles away by a Mongol ruler who was not even on the battlefield. Because before Ain Jalut became the battle that stopped the Mongols, something happened that almost nobody watching the battlefield could have predicted. The Mongols left. For generations, the Mongol armies had seemed unstoppable. Under Genghis Khan and his successors, they had conquered enormous territories across Asia and Eastern Europe. Their secret was not simply numbers, it was speed. A Mongol army could travel astonishing distances, gather intelligence, surround an enemy, rain arrows into its ranks, and then disappear before a slower army could react. They used feigned retreats to turn confidence into disaster. An enemy thought the Mongols were fleeing. Then, when its formation broke apart in pursuit, the Mongols turned around. Suddenly, the hunters became the hunted. This tactic had destroyed armies across Eurasia. And, in 1258, the Mongols brought that terrifying reputation to Baghdad. The Abbasid capital fell. The psychological shock was enormous. If Baghdad could fall, what city was safe? Then, the Mongols pushed farther west. Aleppo fell. Damascus was threatened and effectively surrendered. The road to Egypt appeared open. But then, thousands of miles away, the Mongol world was thrown into uncertainty. The great Khan, Mongke, died during the Mongol campaign in China, and his death created a succession struggle. Hulagu, the Mongol prince commanding the Western campaign, could not simply continue as if nothing had happened. He pulled much of his army back toward Persia. Think about what that meant. The Mongols had spent years building momentum. Now, just as their enemies were terrified and disorganized, the main army disappeared. But Hulagu did not abandon Syria completely. He left a force behind under one of his most trusted commanders. His name was Kitbuqa. And this decision would put him on a collision course with Egypt, because Egypt was ruled by men who understood exactly what the Mongols had done to everyone before them. They were the Mamluks. The Mamluks were elite military slaves who had risen to become Egypt's ruling class. They were professional soldiers. And their new sultan, Qutuz, understood the danger immediately. If he waited, the Mongols might return with a larger army. If he surrendered, Egypt might become the next conquered province. There was only one realistic option. Take the army north. Meet the Mongols before they reached Egypt. But Qutuz faced a terrifying problem. The Mongols had already defeated armies that were larger, richer, and more powerful than his. So, how could the Mamluks possibly win? They could not simply overpower the Mongols. They needed to make the Mongols fight the wrong battle. And that is where Baybars entered the story. Baybars was one of the most capable commanders in the Mamluk army. He understood that, against the Mongols, courage alone was not enough. The Mamluks needed information. They needed terrain. And, most importantly, they needed deception. The two armies eventually converged near Ain Jalut, a fertile valley in Palestine. The name meant Spring of Goliath, and the battlefield offered something extremely valuable: cover. The Mamluks could hide forces among the surrounding terrain. But there was still one enormous problem. The Mongols had cavalry. Fast cavalry. Experienced cavalry. Cavalry trained to punish anyone who retreated. So, Baybars made a decision that could have destroyed his entire army. He would deliberately make the Mongols believe they were winning. At first light, on September 3rd, Baybars advanced with the Mamluk vanguard. He attacked the Mongol position. Then, he turned and retreated. The Mongols followed. This was exactly what Baybars wanted. But imagine being one of those Mongol riders. You have spent your entire life watching enemies run from you. You see the Mamluks retreating. Their formation appears to be breaking. Your commanders order the pursuit. You accelerate. The enemy is getting farther away. Then, suddenly, something feels wrong. The retreat is too controlled. The Mamluks are not scattering. They are pulling you somewhere. But, by the time the Mongols understood what was happening, they were already committed. Baybars had drawn them deeper into the valley. Then, the hidden Mamluk forces appeared. The battlefield changed in seconds. The Mongols, who had expected a fleeing enemy, now faced fresh troops attacking from prepared positions. Their greatest advantage, mobility, was being squeezed. But Kitbuqa did not panic. He counterattacked. The Mongols fought back with the skill that had conquered continents. Arrows filled the air. Mounted warriors crashed into the Mamluk lines. The battle became a brutal struggle of cavalry against cavalry. For a moment, it was not clear who would win. And this is where the story takes another unexpected turn. The Mamluks had planned the trap, but a trap is useless if the enemy can simply break through it. So, Kutuz personally entered the fighting. According to later accounts, he rallied his men at the critical moment. The Mamluks launched another attack. The Mongol formation began to weaken. Kitbuqa's situation became desperate. He had one chance: break through, escape, or die. He chose to keep fighting. The Mongol commander was eventually captured and killed. And, with him, the Mongol army's position collapsed. The army that had spent decades making others flee was now retreating. But here is the part that makes Ain Jalut far more important than a single battlefield victory. The Mamluks had not destroyed the Mongol Empire. The Mongol Empire was still enormous. Hulagu's Ilkhanate would survive. Mongol armies would continue fighting. So, why do historians remember Ain Jalut? Because the battle broke something more powerful than an army. It broke the myth of Mongol invincibility. Before Ain Jalut, kingdoms had every reason to believe that resisting the Mongols was almost suicidal. After Ain Jalut, their enemies had proof. The Mongols could be beaten. Their commanders could be killed. Their armies could be trapped. And their expansion could be stopped. That changed the strategic balance of the Middle East. The Mongols would attempt to recover Syria. They would fight the Mamluks again. But Egypt remained outside their control. The road south had closed. And there was another consequence. Ain Jalut gave the Mamluks enormous prestige. They had not merely survived, they had become the power that stopped the Mongol advance. But remember the question we started with. How did a smaller army defeat a force that had conquered so much of the world? It was not magic. It was not because the Mongols suddenly became weak. It was because the circumstances were finally wrong for them. Hulagu had withdrawn with much of the main army. Kitbuqa was operating with a smaller force. The Mamluks understood Mongol tactics. They chose the battlefield carefully, and Baybars used the one weapon the Mongols themselves had perfected. Deception. He made the Mongols believe they were chasing a defeated enemy. Then, he turned their confidence into a trap. That is the real genius of Ain Jalut. The Mamluks did not defeat the Mongols by becoming better Mongols. They defeated them by understanding how the Mongols thought. And that lesson would echo far beyond 1260. Because empires rarely collapse in the exact place where they first discover their limits. Sometimes, an empire survives the battle, but its enemies survive the fear. And once fear disappears, conquest becomes much harder. At Ain Jalut, the Mongol Empire did not end, but something irreversible happened. For the first time in generations, the Mongols had been forced to retreat from a battlefield because an enemy had outplanned them. The world had witnessed something that once seemed impossible. The Mongols could be stopped. And the man who proved it paid for that lesson with his life. Kitbuqa entered the valley as the commander of an army that had terrified nations. He left it dead. His army left in retreat, and Egypt remained unconquered. So, when you look at Ain Jalut, do not remember it simply as another battle between two medieval armies. Remember it as the moment an unstoppable empire discovered a boundary made of terrain, timing, intelligence, and deception. A boundary the Mongols could cross only at enormous cost. On September 3rd, 1260, the Mongol advance met that boundary, and, for the first time, it finally broke apart. The empire survived. The conquest did not, and that is why Ain Jalut became the battle that finally stopped the Mongols.